Hey there, my name is Felicia Giouzelis. I am a master healer, and I'm here to talk to you today about the abandonment core wound when it manifests as rejection. Hang with me and let's get started. The abandonment core wound is something I see with literally all of the women that I work with. This is something that comes up when you dealt with some form of emotional neglect in your childhood. This is when you didn't feel seen or feel heard, or your parents, society, your teachers, your friends, family ignored you. The term that my clients use a lot is feeling like they don't belong. They'll say something like, I felt like the black sheep, right? Feeling like I just don't belong. And it's something that will make you kind of reach and seek for love. That shows up as validation. You will put your power and your energy into something or someone outside of you. In other words, your happiness is dependent on how that person acts or how they interact with you or what they do for you. So what often happens is people can't meet your expectations. And as a result, you'll feel really let down. It's because you're expecting them to meet your needs, and inevitably people can't do that. They fail at that. And it's probably in part because you're not able to clearly communicate what your needs are, right? This is something that comes up. Again, it's stemming from this abandonment core wound and childhood. When you're not feeling heard, you're not feeling seen, you're not feeling loved, you won't have a developed ability to communicate in a healthy way. That's because you've learned to suppress your emotions, to suppress your feelings, to just push them down. Let's talk about why that happens. With an abandonment core wound, if you're feeling invisible in your family, right? You're feeling like nobody's paying attention to you. Nobody's listening to you. Nobody's helping you process your emotions. That children should be seen and not heard type of energy. What actually happens is you shapeshift and you become someone who is going to be seen by them. Kids are super smart sponges when we're young, right? You learned through watching what they praised you for, whether it was parents or someone else. You learned very quickly what was going to get you the attention and the love that you needed. This was a way that you learned to cope. So you became that. And that is actually the toxic people-pleasing cycle. That's when and where it starts. So you learn to shapeshift and become who was going to get that love and attention and validation, which we need in childhood. You became that so that you would get it. Now as an adult, if you're an adult woman watching this now, you probably don't know who you are. You don't know what you need. You don't know what you want. You can't make a choice. Even deciding what you want for dinner might be a challenge. It's debilitating when you become an adult and still have that type of wounding going on. And that needs to be healed. And it can be healed. That's just an abandonment core wound. It absolutely can be healed. And it's definitely a process. But what I want to talk about today is when rejection shows up with abandonment. So abandonment is the actual wound, but rejection is one of the symptoms. It's how it actually shows up in your space. Now, someone with an abandonment core wound, that's a loss of love. When we look at the root cause of what's causing abandonment, you feel like you're not loved, right? And there are it's like two sides of the same coin for abandonment. So one side is when you have this wound, you will hold on really tightly to people and situations because you don't want to be abandoned, right? But you may also hold on really tightly because you don't want to abandon them. That type of relationship, if you've been in something like this, you will ignore all red flags. Literally, somebody could hand you a bouquet of red flags and you'll just be like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. And you will just have those rose-colored glasses on and that's how you function because you're afraid of being abandoned. right? Or you could have the flip side. You're afraid of abandoning others, staying in a job that's toxic for way too long, for example, because you're loyal. The abandonment core wound uses loyalty as an excuse, right? Stays committed to things that are toxic because that's what you're used to. You're not used to being treated well. And that's how that shows up. What you're used to is emotional neglect. You're used to people treating you badly. And the wound wants to stay with what it's used to. So again, completely healable once you're aware. And I'm sharing this with you so you can kind of start to break the patterns down and see how you can get out of this cycle. Now, when it shows up as rejection though, I love this because these are the two most common ways that it shows up. So when you have the abandonment core wound and rejection comes into the picture, you are ultra independent. The independent woman. I can do things on my own. I don't need anybody's help. That's actually the shadow side, that people-pleasing energy of abandonment. You're doing it on your own because you're afraid very deep down inside that if you show up and do exactly what you want and you show up exactly as you are in your full light and your full breath, you'll be rejected for showing up that way. And that stems from childhood, when you did show up and you were just being yourself and you were punished for it, you were talked down to, you were brushed aside, or worse, you were ignored. Nobody saw you for who you really are. And when you saw that that wasn't accepted or acceptable, you morphed and shapeshifted into somebody that would be acceptable, betraying yourself in the process. And that's how that cycle begins, that rejection abandonment cycle. Now, what's actually happening is you're rejecting yourself when this goes on. And that started in childhood, of course, when you saw that it wasn't getting you the love and attention. That wasn't your fault, and you didn't have a better way to cope with it. But that's where that cycle starts. Children are extremely intelligent. They are able to just perceive the world around them and go, "Ooh, that's not getting me love. How about this? I'll try this. I'll try that." And just be curious. And the problem is you become that. That ends up being who you are, and you don't come back to yourself because we're kids. We don't recognize that that's going to cause us harm down the road. And you probably had parents that you act more like the parents than they do, right? Like you're more responsible. You take on a lot of responsibility. You tend to make the right choices in spite of the type of environment you came from and were living in. And those, again, are symptoms of an abandonment core wound. You take on a lot of responsibility. So that's kind of where that rejection cycle comes from. It can be unraveled. It can be healed. I have a lot more videos coming to you. If you want to see them, hit that subscribe button and click that little bell so that you'll be notified when I put another video up, because certainly rejection is not the only way that the abandonment wound shows up.